The place where we turn your complex stack of sources into clear, actionable knowledge. Today, we're undertaking a really fascinating exploration into the life of Alexander Hamilton. Not just the historical figure, but also the man whose legacy, well, it's been dramatically re-examined lately, hasn't it? Especially through pop culture.
It really has.
Yeah.
And it's the perfect time for this dive. Your sources, they frame Hamilton as this ultimate American double threat.
Yeah.
Once a sparkling theoretician of government, but also a masterful, incredibly tireless executive.
Exactly. And we often try to separate the founders, right, into the idealists and the pragmatists, but Hamilton, he seems to have been both. If Thomas Jefferson gave us the essential poetry of American political discourse, the soaring ideals, the vital rhetoric, Hamilton, well, he established the necessary prose, the blueprints, the budgets, the real nuts and bolts of statecraft.
That's a great way to put it. That framing is just critical. He wasn't just an architect. He was like supervising the construction too. He and James Madison were really the prime movers behind getting the Constitutional Convention going. And Hamilton himself was the chief author and, importantly, the supervisor of those foundational arguments in the Federalist Papers.
Right.
So our mission today, as I see it, is to distill the core facts of his visionary genius. Maybe look beneath the surface of his, explosive personal life.
Definitely explosive.
And try to figure out where the drama, the stuff we see in popular takes ends, and where the historical record actually begins.
Okay, let's unpack this visionary genius part first, because the sources really paint Hamilton as almost a prophet of the American future. One source calls him the messenger from a future that we now inhabit. He just seemed to look straight past the prevailing ideals of his time.
He absolutely did. While Jefferson was sort of clinging to this romantic, but ultimately, let's face it, unsustainable vision.
The rosy agrarian rhetoric.
Exactly, and the slave-holding reality that underpinned it. Hamilton, meanwhile, he envisioned the America we actually live in now, a bustling world defined by trade, industry, stock markets, and crucially, centralized banking. He was the one who really decided America's financial future lay in embracing capitalism, not, fearing it.
And what's just amazing to me is that he didn't just write reports about this future. He physically built the infrastructure needed to support it. I mean, it's one thing to have a great idea. It's completely another to construct the institutional scaffolding for an entire nation.
He essentially contrived the entire smoothly running machinery of a modern nation state almost from scratch. Just think about the sheer scope of his administrative competence. It's really never been equaled, has it?
I don't think so.
He created the entire budget system, a funded debt structure, the tax system, the central bank, a customs service, and the Coast Guard. He basically defined the Treasury Department as we understand it today.
And how much was this economic vision tied into his social ideals? Because the sources really emphasize his abolitionism wasn't just like a side project. It was integral to this whole economic plan.
Oh, completely linked, yeah. Hamilton's entire economic model championed a meritocratic vision. An open, fluid elite based on ability and money. And that model was the total antithesis of the static, land-based plantation system. He championed merit over lineage, which was, frankly, a radical idea for his era, especially when you contrast it with the slaveholding South.
That institutional meritocratic focus, though, it seems like it was forged in an incredibly difficult youth. His origins almost read like a novel, like a tragedy.
I really do.
Yeah.
He was born outside of wedlock. His mother, Rachel, was incredibly star-crossed, as one source puts it. She was fleeing a terrible marriage, which kind of inadvertently led to Alexander's illegitimacy. Gave him a rough, unstable start for sure. But also, surprisingly, maybe a strong character model.
Yeah, we see that strength in his mother, don't we? The sources note her proud defiance, her mental toughness when she faced persecution. And they say it was almost a preview of her son's own passionately willful behavior. It's pretty telling that he later reflected on marriage, saying something like, "'Tis a dog of a life when two dissonant tempers meet." He clearly knew about domestic strife early on.
Right. And despite all that hardship, what really stands out is his discipline, his focus. He was the ultimate self-made intellect. While he was just a clerk in the West Indies, he kept this pay book, right?
Oh.
And he filled 112 pages of it with notes from his own reading, philosophy, history, Bacon, Hobbes, Cicero.
Wow.
He was constantly tooling up, equipping his mind for a bigger stage. It's like he sensed he was destined for more.
And his writing ability literally became his ticket out. That pivotal moment, the lethal hurricane on St. Croix. He wrote this description, apocalyptic sense of universal tumult and disorder. But he also added this striking admonishment of the rich for just being complacent.
And that letter, it was so eloquent, it generated such a sensation that local businessmen actually created a fund. They pooled money to send this promising youth, as they called him, to North America to get educated.
He literally wrote his way into the founding father narrative.
He did.
And those early years, they were crucial for his later policies too, weren't they? His apprenticeship in the West Indies wasn't just reading books. It gave him real, intimate knowledge of trade, the scarcity of cash, even the realities of smuggling.
Absolutely. That real-world grounding proved invaluable later on when he was setting up the Customs Service and the Coast Guard. He'd also seen firsthand that paradox of the island economies, right? Relying solely on sugar. That lack of diversification, it deeply informed his arguments later for promoting industry in the Report on Manufacturers. The man truly lived his policies before he wrote them.
It's amazing how perfectly his past seemed to prepare him. But his real reputation, and let's be honest, the drama that follows him, that was really forged in the fire of political combat. Let's maybe pivot to those famous feuds now, starting with his time alongside Washington.
Yeah, Hamilton was indispensable as Washington's chief aide. He was basically his chief of staff, you could argue. He had this instinctive tact, as one source calls it, for writing letters on Washington's behalf. It was like an inspired act of ventriloquism.
So what did that ventriloquism actually look like? Was he just, cleaning up Washington's rough drafts, or was he really projecting policies and ideas that maybe Washington wouldn't have articulated himself in quite the same way?
Oh, it was much more than editing. It was synthesis, it was projection. Washington was the general, the leader, but Hamilton often provided that sharp political vision and the clear constitutional language. He could sort of instinctively project himself into the general's mind and come up with the perfect strategic response or argument. But, the relationship was complex. Hamilton, for all his admiration, he definitely felt competitive, and he found it temperamentally hard, as you put it, to subordinate himself to anyone, even Washington.
Yeah, you can see that. And his independent, maybe sometimes high-handed style, it certainly didn't win him universal friends in Congress, did it? We have some vivid quotes in the sources showing just how venomous the opposition was, especially when he was pushing his big financial policies.
Oh, the rhetoric was incredibly intense. Nobody captured that outrage better than Senator William McClay. He kept this meticulous journal, right? And he just castigated Hamilton, called him His Holiness, a damnable villain. Mostly because of the Treasury Secretary's high-pressure lobbying during those financial debates.
Wow, damnable villain. That really shows the intensity of the political divide he created, even among people who were supposedly on the same side. What exactly made debates like debt assumption so incredibly fraught that they provoked that kind of hatred?
Well, it boiled down to centralization and profit, really. Debt assumption meant the federal government would take over all the individual Revolutionary War debts from the states. Now, this was super contentious, first, because it dramatically centralized federal power, which, opponents deeply feared.
Right, the states' rights argument.
Exactly. And second, because a lot of that state debt had already been sold off dirt cheap to speculators. So when the federal government guaranteed the debt at full face value, it meant huge instant windfalls for those speculators, many of whom, happened to be Hamilton's friends and political allies.
Oof. Yeah, that would look bad.
It looked like corruption. Even if Hamilton argued it was necessary, sound finance for the nation's credit. It definitely added fuel to the fire.
Which brings us inevitably to the famous or maybe infamous Reynolds affair. And here, the sources clarify that the popular narrative, like in the musical, takes some significant chronological liberties. It often places the investigation much later under the Adams administration.
Yeah, that's definitely a timeline condensed for dramatic effect. Hamilton actually handed in his resignation as Treasury Secretary way back in December 1794. That was 2 full years before John Adams even became president. The initial investigation into potential financial misconduct, the one where he was questioned by James Monroe, Frederick Muhlenberg, and Abraham Venable, that happened much earlier, December 1792.
Okay, so back in 92, his political opponents were already suspicious about financial wrongdoing in the Treasury. And Hamilton, basically to prove he wasn't engaged in illegal speculation, admitted to the affair with Maria Reynolds instead. Is that the sequence?
Precisely. He chose to confess to adultery, a personal sin, however damaging to shield himself from charges of using his public office for financial gain. That was a political and potentially criminal charge he couldn't afford. That admission in 1792 temporarily stopped the investigation, but Monroe and his allies, they kept the documents.
Okay. And that set the stage for the real political disaster years later, the publication of the Reynolds pamphlet. Why on earth did he revisit this incredibly compromising material in 1797?
Well, he felt forced into it. He was attacked publicly by a journalist, James Callender, who published notes derived from that old 1792 meeting. So to avoid the implication that he was secretly guilty of financial fraud all along, Hamilton chose to preemptively publish the now infamous Reynolds pamphlet himself. He detailed the entire sordid affair, the relationship, the blackmail letters from James Reynolds, everything. Confessed the adultery to the entire American public in excruciating detail across 95 pages.
95 pages.
Yes, all to prove that the only crime committed was personal, not professional.
And the political result was just catastrophic, wasn't it? It created one of the first truly massive public scandals in American political history, permanently damaged his reputation for decades.
It was an act of almost complete political self-destruction, driven entirely by his overwhelming need to clear his name professionally, no matter the personal cost.
This tendency toward, well, political self-destruction seems to be a recurring theme, doesn't it? And it leads us almost directly down the road to Weehawken and the duel with Aaron Burr. The duel is often dramatically tied back to the tied election of 1800 between Jefferson and Burr, but the sources say that wasn't the immediate trigger.
No, that's right. The duel itself was actually triggered 4 years later in 1804. The direct cause was Aaron Burr's really crushing defeat in the New York gubernatorial election. He lost to Morgan Lewis. And after that loss, a letter got published repeating some comment about Hamilton holding a despicable opinion of Burr. And Burr decided that was an insult to his honor that he couldn't let stand.
What's truly remarkable, though, reading the sources, is Hamilton's almost chilling professionalism while preparing for what could be a fatal encounter. He actually delayed the final duel date.
He did. The final arrangements were put on hold, so Hamilton could fulfill his sense of professional responsibility to his law clients. They had important interests, as he put it, pending in court. That astonishing composure, meticulously handling his law docket right before facing a loaded gun, it speaks volumes about his commitment to his work, even right at the very end of his life.
But his decision once he got to the dueling ground, that's the central tragedy, isn't it? He confided to friends beforehand, like Rufus King, that he intended to waste his shot, to fire harmlessly into the woods.
Yes, and King gave him that stark warning. Then, sir, you will go like a lamb to be slaughtered.
Yeah.
Burr had absolutely no knowledge of this private vow. Hamilton was essentially going through the motions to uphold his honor, but not intending to actually harm Burr, which just compounded the tragedy when Burr's shot proved fatal.
The aftermath is described as just heartbreakingly contrasting. Hamilton, as soon as he was struck, immediately knew his fate. He proclaimed, "I am a dead man."
And Burr's demeanor, by contrast, was reportedly the complete opposite. Sources suggest he was perfectly at ease and, from reports, seemingly in perfect composure. He apparently even had an amiable business chat with his broker shortly after the shooting.
Wow.
Meanwhile, Hamilton was dying, slowly and painfully. And we really have to mention Eliza, his wife. She spent the next 50 years fiercely devoted to preserving his reputation against what she called that nefarious band of his critics.
So we've covered the brilliant architect and the deeply flawed man. When you put it all together, what does this mean for his enduring legacy? He built the institutional scaffolding for America's future power, championed a radically modern meritocratic vision.
He was absolutely the principal architect of the governmental structure, certainly. But the sources, taken together, they do suggest a key psychological flaw, something that really defined his political trajectory, maybe even his fate. Hamilton was a man of truly daunting intellect, achieved staggering structural success for the country, yet he seemed to continually make the same profound political error.
Which was?
He never knew when to stop.
That compulsive, almost self-destructive tendency. The same one that led him to the dueling ground.
Precisely. His need for ultimate vindication, his refusal or maybe inability to practice restraint, it led him into totally unnecessary self-inflicted political wounds. Whether it was the detailed, humiliating excess of the Reynolds pamphlet or his gratuitous, damaging polemic against President Adams later on, or even his refusal to find an easier way out in the duel negotiations. This inability to just pull back, to let something go, often led him into these irremediable indiscretions. This tendency to pursue every single argument to its most extreme conclusion, well, that may have been the very vulnerability that ultimately undercut his brilliant but tragically shortened political career.
What a profound and frankly sad insight. A genius who created stability for a nation but maybe lacked the internal stability to fully manage his own political life. Thank you so much for helping us dive deep into these complex sources today.